Hello, and welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Leading the Way in Education. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you insightful discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education. As a former middle school teacher and corporate communications executive, I'm blending my expertise to provide private sector insights to the most important institution, public education. Systemic change requires public and private working together in the best interest of our students and our communities. I'm here to share how my experience with corporate clients can and should influence the way we think about marketing and the educational ecosystem. We'll talk about what's working, what isn't working, and how to change the paradigm of public versus private once and for all. In this episode, it's the second of a two-part series. I'm digging deep into how social media can increase student engagement when it's done right. We'll discuss why it plays a pivotal role in student engagement, providing a dynamic platform for interaction, communication, and collaboration. But in our last episode, we explored a number of concerns raised in the last several years as to the efficacy of social media connections for the purpose of education, specifically around things like professionalism, ethics, privacy, legal concerns, violation of guidelines, and more. But today we're going to look at what happens when it's done right. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the first of this series, I would encourage you to go back and do that. Listen to that episode first and then come back and pick up the second part. And as a side note, if after this podcast you'd like an even deeper understanding of this topic and ways to best implement it at your school, check out our online course at kandulacommunications.com. There you'll find instruction on this and other topics that are meant to support your team in building your capacity for communication. I hope you'll check it out. So let's get to it. First, let's be honest. Building a sustainable social media initiative requires people, multiple platforms, and a whole lot of time to publish. Perhaps there was a day when it was not perceived as that difficult. Maybe we could have a student or hire an intern. However, we know now that social media in and of itself is a job, particularly if it's done right. So you'll need someone to enforce guidelines, which we'll talk about in a minute. Moderate comments, keep the platforms fresh and interesting. And it's possible you might be hearing this and saying, there's no way we do not. Our resources are so strapped and our people are working so hard as it is, multiple jobs. We just will not be able to manage this in our district or in our school. And of course, if that's the case, there are many contract agencies that are available to work with you for extra support just at an hourly, part-time, a relationship. So think about that. And let's face it, despite being a seemingly free, quote unquote, tactic, it's hard to underestimate the work involved. But assuming that you have people in place, perhaps you have someone designated to do this type of work in your front office, or maybe you have a relationship with an agency that's contracted. So assuming you have people in place, now what? In last week's episode, we dug into some very difficult topics related to the legal and ethical risks when leaning into social as a communication strategy. If you didn't listen to that one, please go back and listen to that one first. But one thing to note is with guidelines in place and utilizing some best practices, you really can stay in control of your message and experience the benefits to your brand and your school. So here are some things that you'll want to think about. First, setting appropriate expectations of interaction on your pages. So making sure there are guidelines that are very clear when someone goes to follow your page on Facebook, there are very clear guidelines that say what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in interacting with your posts. That message can be for teachers, students, and anybody else in the community who's connecting with you and seeing your content. So that's first, very important. The second consideration that you'll want to think about is encouraging appropriate interaction between teachers and students. This even includes teachers who have maybe a private profile on any social platform, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, who may or may not be actually posting appropriate content for children. And I hate to say it because we want to think that's not the case, but it does happen. So that is something just to keep in mind as well. In the episode notes, you'll find a link to some more resources and templates that you can use that will help you think through and create really thorough guidelines to address these considerations. These tools will explain where to put them, how to phrase certain things, what to think about so that you're not missing anything. That's super, super important. If you don't have guidelines in place, please do this first and feel free to use the tools that are in these episode notes, the links to help you. But assuming you've got guidelines in place now, what comes next? So let's start by thinking about your content from our students' perspective. It really isn't worth all the effort, and we know it takes a lot of time if they just won't engage with your content, or for some reason it's just missing them. It's maybe not connecting or resonating in the way that you would want it to. So to match a school's social media content with what students want to engage with, it's essential to understand interests, habits, and communication styles. So I'm going to give you 9 ideas, just throwing out 9 ideas to positively and proactively connect with your students. Okay, so this first idea is you can use your social pages to conduct student surveys and get their feedback. You can really conduct surveys or focus groups about just about anything. Perhaps there's an idea for a new program at school and you want to gauge interest. Uh, or perhaps you're launching your pages, so you want to understand more about their content preferences. Maybe ask them about their favorite platforms where they spend most of their time, or content that they like to enjoy engaging with, and frequency, etc. So there's really many different things you can use a survey for when you're trying to add value to your school community. So that's one way to think about it. A second idea, just observe trends and pop culture. Social provides a really easy conduit into kind of their world, particularly sites like TikTok. Stay current with some of the trends and pop culture that are popular among students. Obviously, keeping it appropriate. Clearly, one other, as we talked about in the first episode, our last week's episode, there are some trends in TikTok that are destructive. They're destructive and illegal. And at the least, you may have a way of really seeing what's out there if you have a presence on these platforms as well, almost in a way getting ahead of that. But thinking positively too, there are a lot of fun trends in pop culture that are popular among students that are perfectly fine and would be, if you found a way to be relatable, might really catch their attention. Even just things like new vocabulary. I don't know about you, but I do have teenagers and I have a very hard time keeping up with the latest in their vocabulary these days. So there's a lot a fun you could have with that. Another idea is diversify content format. So recognizing that students have various preferences, mix up your content, maybe some images, videos, infographics are great, polls, interactive elements just to cater for some of their different preferences and catch their attention. Third, make sure you're highlighting student achievements and contributions. Now, the caveat to this is, of course, we want to, particularly for K-12, we really have a responsibility to their privacy. But if you're maybe recognizing a department for a recent award, or the school overall, the school body, or maybe it's a class at school that has done something incredible, showcasing accomplishments, projects, and contributions are a fantastic way for them to see that they're being appreciated. And even recognizing teachers for fostering a sense of pride and community. Number 5, so behind the scenes content. This is a little different, but you could offer behind the scenes look at school life, sharing a glimpse of classrooms, events, day-to-day activities, or even something big like behind the scenes at graduation, what really goes on, or perhaps behind the scenes at a pep rally. This type of engagement not only aligns with the interactive nature of social, but it makes students also feel engaged, giving them a sense of something that they wouldn't have seen before. Another idea, student takeovers. This one might sound scary, but allowing students to periodically take over social media accounts. But think of it like this. You might have, particularly at your high school, you might have a media class. Those students may or may not participate in a television show. Maybe there's a news program that is then broadcast throughout the school community. If you think about it like that, giving students the chance to actually write the news and produce the show, you're giving them that opportunity at social too. The benefit of that is that you get their insights. That they're going to see it from a perspective that you're not. They're going to come at it with some fresh ideas or a savviness that maybe you don't have. Although it sounds scary, you can do this in a way that is perfectly appropriate with guidelines in place and proper training for teachers. This could be something that could be a lot of fun. Next idea, making sure that timely and relevant information is distributed over your channels. This is a obvious one, I would say, but certainly anything, you've got football games coming up, there are important dates, prom, anything that students need to know about or remember, all of this news and information can be shared. Another one, collaborate with student clubs and organizations. If you collaborate, let's say student government or DECA or any of these organizations you could team up with and co-create content for. They have some motivations, obviously, to push maybe some of their messages, programs, and events. And you can do that with them together. Could be a quick interview over a Facebook Live and engaging them or something else. But that's another idea. So these are just some ideas to get you thinking about what you could do to engage students, help them feel involved, perhaps even giving them ownership, but setting priorities by identifying what your goals are is a good first step. So I've given you a lot of ideas. You may or may not want to do all of these. Maybe only 2 of these are appropriate for your particular community. That's great. If you want two-way engagement, maybe you just want a one-way engagement, you just want to disseminate important information quickly, or maybe you want to just use it as a PR channel just to highlight your awards and recognition, or all of the above. Think about what you want to use it for, and then you can start to identify what some ideas that would help you reach that objective. But at the end of the day, we all need to know whether or not the extra work we're putting into this is actually working, right? Is it effective? Couple of ideas on ways you can just gauge that. First, just ask for feedback. Regularly review and adapt your strategy based on some feedback and performance metrics. So just being responsive to what students enjoy, or even just asking them whether this is content that they like, is how you'll know to be aligned with their preferences. So sometimes the metrics will just show you that. You can tell that certain topics maybe are more popular than others. Sometimes different platforms are more popular than others, but sometimes it's just good to ask. Another way is monitoring your analytics. So again, you'll be able to track your performance by platform, by different types of content. You can analyze likes and shares and comments. It doesn't have to be very scientific. You don't need to have a data analyst on staff who's going to help you analyze all of this data. I suppose you could, and large districts maybe perhaps do, but that's not necessary. You can really gauge by looking at the analytics over every couple of weeks. You can gauge what's working and what's not. So consider creating content also specifically for individual platforms. Here's another idea. So when you're trying to grow audiences, it can take a lot more time, but it can be effective if you're thinking about them by platform. Using TikToks for memes, YouTube for videos, Instagram for more visual content, X, formerly Twitter, for maybe some quick announcements that you need to get out and also news, and perhaps LinkedIn to feature local partnerships or even maybe job opportunities for students. And another tactic I'd like you to think about is also leaning into Gen Z's focus on influencers. We know that Gen Z tends to index high on influencer followings. If we want to do this, it obviously would need to be in a really relevant way. So here's a story that we came across when we were doing research for this episode. According to Rival IQ's social media industry benchmark report, we found that the University of Iowa has been America's top university for social engagement for four successive years. So why is it doing so well? There are a lot of things actually, but one of them is a brilliant way that they've engaged their alumni network and using really high profile alumni that they've found from their university who can share stories to their students. as a way to promote the university. Research from Common Sense and SurveyMonkey found that teens are just as likely to listen to celebrities, influencers, personalities as they are friends, family, and news organizations. So that's just a little tip that if you do have an alumni network that is pretty organized well and you're pretty engaged with, and you may already off the top of your head, even if you're a high school or elementary school, know that you perhaps have alumni that are high profile, that is well known to the community, and why not bring them in and see if they can help promote your school, the great things that you're doing, and also promote enrollment as well. So that's another idea. Here's another story that we came across, though, slightly different. Let's face it, students, high school students especially, they can be a bit quirky. I know this because I have a 17-year-old at my house, and it's always really awkward when he shows me a TikTok video and he just cannot stop laughing. And I sincerely don't get it. I do not get the joke. Sometimes the more random and weird for them, like the better when it comes to getting their attention. So let me give you an example of this that we came across at University of Michigan's Twitter account. So evidently there's an egg, and you may know this already, there's an egg video. Across the country, this egg video is known as the world record egg account. It has almost 5 million followers on Instagram. And this egg just travels. It's a cult collegiate following, so it just travels from university to university, from college to college, and it's captured on video, and then those videos are transferred and uploaded to the Instagram account. Super random. I don't know what is so interesting about an egg rolling around the school, but it has a cult collegiate following. When you can find things like this that you can use something fun to do at your school, rolling an egg around, and then leveraging the 5 million followers on Instagram, you've certainly tapped into a cult-like interest. And so sometimes there's a way, if you spend enough time really help better understanding their world on social, you may come across things like this. So that was another funny one. But we know all of these links, by the way, we're going to put in the episode notes. If you want to take a look at them, if you want to look at the Instagram account or the video, we'll keep them there for you. In social media, we know consistency is key. It really is everything. We talked earlier about sustainability, and this is what we mean. If you want to grow a sustainable social strategy, obviously your team is really important. Time is important. Making sure engagement and moderation and moderating pages are important. But what you invest in grows. So a consistent presence on these platforms you choose is extremely important to them being successful. But if you're still not sure, here's what we do know. According to a recent survey, 73% of students use social media in education to collaborate with their classmates in all forms of electronics, tablets, mobile, and computer. 73%. 30% of secondary students use social media to collaborate on group projects. So even today, without any interference with the school pages themselves, students are still collaborating via social media. And here's a really interesting one. College students who use social media for educational purposes are 3 times more likely to earn a degree than those who do not. Super interesting statistic there. Perhaps it's that community element, the accountability, maybe the collaboration. But we thought that was a very interesting statistic. But in wrapping up today's episode, I just want to recap on some of the essential steps for identifying effective social media channels. We began talking about the effectiveness of guidelines, to set expectations, and some ideas to use the platform to engage with students, such as surveys, diversified content formats, and even maybe student takeovers and other ideas. But we know that the impact on student engagement and the educational experience has been profound. We know that students feel more connected, informed, and involved in the school community, suggesting that incorporating a social strategy, if it's done, can help you amplify the very best aspects of your school community. So we encourage you, if you need help, if you want to reach out, definitely utilize some of the resources and the links that we're giving you in the episode notes. But you can always reach out to me. Andrea@communications.com. That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please catch us next